Hello, this is number 4 in my coaching tips videos. In this second part of my climbing tips, I want to discuss with you the techniques involved in going uphill. And there's quite a few basic ones that I see time and time again people getting wrong. They get to the bottom of the hill and they're in the wrong gear. And they've got the big ring on the front and they're changing up at the back so that they're on the big sprocket at the back. The chain line is going across at an acute angle. The rear mech is strained on its springs to its fullest extent. Then they realise that they're on the big ring, bang it off, change on the left hand, down into the small ring, chain off, and they haven't even started climbing yet. So it's really important to get into the right gear at the right time without losing too much momentum. So the way I've been training people to do that is to change up on the right hand. So you change up 2 gears, say, on your rear mech, and then you change from the big ring to the small ring on the front mech. And that means that because the rear mech hasn't stretched as far, there's not as much spring in it and no recoil when you actually come off the big ring onto the small ring. And it's that recoil effect that sends a shockwave up the chain that sometimes takes the chain off at the front. So in my very first video I spoke about some advice that I'd received from this old cyclist. When I asked him how I could go up hills faster, he told me to ride the downhills, and I demonstrated how you could use very small gradients on the road and undulations on the road to gain a lot of speed. And you can do that with quite a lot of hills, quite a few of the hills, especially around here, because there's a lot of hills that have a downhill leading into an uphill. And if you can carry a lot of speed on the downhill section, not just by coasting, but actually by pedaling, by getting into a nice low tuck position and aero position, you can get a significant distance up the next hill without actually using a lot of effort. Okay, this is the first clip. It's on the Ironman Wales route between Narberth and Princess Gate. A lot of up and downs here. So coming down this little descent, trying to get as much speed as possible, 30 something miles an hour. Down into the bottom of the valley, coming out of it now, keeping the power on, trying to keep that speed as far up the hill as I can. Dropping down quickly through the gears now. Coming off the big ring onto the small ring, double shifting. Speed's dropping really quickly now, but trying to keep the cadence high. Down to normal climbing speed. And you're quite a way up the hill already. This is the second clip. This is going from Carew towards Cresseli Mountain, I think this climb is, and you've got this really fast descent leading down into the climb. So I'm keeping the power on, cadence high, trying to get as much speed as I can. I'm in a low aero tuck position. You see the power creeping up, 200 plus watts. Now we get down to the bottom of the valley. Now the hill starts kicking in. Did you see my watts going up slightly? I'm trying to keep that speed going as far into the hill as I can. I'm not burning a lot of energy, I'm not going over my threshold, just trying to keep that power high. Coming down quickly through the gears now as the hill kicks in. See, my cadence is still high. Dropping down, big ring onto small ring, double shifting and not losing any momentum by doing that. Still carrying speed from that descent into this hill, 13, 12, 11 miles an hour. Probably down to my normal climbing speed on this hill now. My power's down around zone 2, zone 3. That's quite a long way up the hill I've just managed to get, just from carrying that speed from the downhill. Here's the last clip. This is the Ridgeway climb coming from Lamphey. And just before the climb you've got this little bit of a downhill going over the bridge. Now you can get up to nearly 30 miles an hour on that little downhill. So here we go, over the bridge. trying to keep the power high now, trying to keep that speed going as far into the
There are
hill as I
very
can.
few occasions when
Hills
you need
kicking
to
in, dropping
climb
down
in the
through
big
the gears
ring.
again.
Other than
Cadence
very,
high.
very short, gentle climbs, you're much better off getting
Speed
into the
coming
small
down.
ring as soon as you
Yeah,
can.
probably normal climbing
That
speed
gives
now,
you a bigger
7-8
range of
miles
gears
an hour
that
on
you
this
can
climb.
change into, because the idea is to try and keep your cadence as high as possible. In my turbo sessions, I've discussed what power is and how power is calculated. And power is basically speed times force. Speed is how fast you're turning the pedals round, your cadence, and force is how hard you're pushing down on the pedals. So by keeping your cadence high, you're keeping the force relatively low for the same power. Okay, so somebody with a cadence of 80 on a hill, going up side by side with somebody of the same weight, riding the same bike, etc., they would be pushing a certain force. If the person next to them is riding in his big ring and he's got a cadence of 40, for the same speed and the same power up the hill, that guy is pushing twice as much force with his legs. That means that he's going to fatigue quicker. So keeping your cadence relatively high when you're climbing is a prerequisite. That might mean that you need to take your bike to a bike shop and get them to look at the available gearing that you could fit on your bike. It might mean a bigger cassette with a 32 tooth big sprocket. It might mean changing from a semi-compact 36 on the front to a 34. Anything like that that's going to help you get up the hills with a slightly higher cadence. If you decide you're going to change the rear cassette yourself, just make sure that you change your chain as well for a longer chain, and that your rear mech is capable of taking a 32 tooth cassette. So just to summarise, you want to try and keep as much speed as you can going into the hill. And because we've got a lot of undulating terrain around us in Pembrokeshire, you can do that quite easily. Just ride the downhills, like that old cyclist told me. You want to keep your cadence as high as you can. That's going to reduce the muscular fatigue in your legs. You don't want to be climbing with low cadence. And just to finish with a few more tips, if you sit back on the saddle when you're climbing and grip the bars sort of like so, two hands just on either side of the stem, you're pushing your weight back onto the back wheel, and by doing that it means that the bike is going to go much more in a straight line. When you're climbing out of the saddle, standing climb, try not to put too much weight on the front wheel. That's going to take energy in your arms and shoulders to support your weight. You want to try and get your weight going down through the pedals. As I mentioned in part 1 of my climbing videos, my philosophy is to use the hills as a recovery section of the rides. That means I do my eating and drinking mainly when I'm going up the hills, and it's something that you need to learn to do, because if you're going relatively slowly, you can have a balance problem. So you need to get out and practice that. The other thing is that if you're able to eat and drink, it normally means that you're not pushing too hard, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to breathe properly. So it's a good measure of the right effort level into climbing the hills. So by preserving some energy on the climbs, you'll be able to use that energy where it's more effective on downhills and flat sections of the road. And hopefully that'll give you an increase in your overall speed. So until next time, happy climbing.